Hello, so this is my video recording for the lesson plan on the branches of government. Good morning, boys and girls. So welcome to class today. Today we are going to be learning about the branches of government at all different levels, so national, state, and local government levels, and how our government is broken up into the three branches, so which are legislative, executive, and judicial. So to begin and start our lesson, we are first going to watch a Schoolhouse Rock video that's going to give us a nice overview of some of the things we're going to be learning about today and those three branches that we're going to be learning about, and just a nice introduction about what we're going to see. So as you watch the video, I would like you all to write down maybe something that you found interesting, something that you learned and didn't know, or a question that this video provoked, and we're going to ask some student volunteers after we watch the video. So now let's just all sit back, and I'm going to want you all to bring your attention to the board, and we're going to watch this quick video.
The three-ring government.
Gonna have a three-ring circus someday. People will say it's a fine one, son. Gonna have a three-ring circus someday. People will come from miles around. Lions, tigers, acrobats, and jugglers and clowns galore. Tightrope walkers, pony riders, elephants, and so much more. Guess I got the idea right here at school. Felt like a fool when they called my name, talking about the government and how it's arranged, divided in three like a circus. Ring one, executive. Two is legislative, that's Congress. Ring three, judiciary. See, it's kinda like my circus. Step right up and visit ring number one. The show's just begun. Meet the president. I am here to see that the laws get done. The ringmaster of the government. On with the show! Hurry, hurry, hurry to ring number two. See what they do in the Congress. Passing laws and juggling bills. Oh, it's quite a thrill in the Congress. Focus your attention on ring number three. The judiciary's in the spotlight. The courts take the laws and they tame the crimes, balancing the wrongs with your rights. No one part can be more powerful than any other is. Each controls the other, you see, and that's what we call checks and balance. Says, well, everybody's act is part of the show, and no one's job is more important. The audience is kind of like the country, you know, keeping an eye on their performance. Ring one, executive. Two is legislative, that's Congress. Ring three, judiciary. See, it's kind of like my circus. My circus. I'm gonna have a three-ring circus someday. People will say it's a fine one, son. But until I get it, I'll do my thing. With government, it's got three rings.
Alrighty. So now I'm going to stop sharing that. All right, boys and girls, so that was a wonderful video, as you could see, about the branches of government and kind of a nice introduction into our lesson. So let's have some student volunteers talk about a question that this video might have provoked that they came up with, some interesting fact that they found, or something just that they learned that they never knew about the branches of government before. All right, boys and girls, thank you so much for sharing. I really, really loved all your questions and your facts. They were great. And just to kind of go over, what our video was about, let's talk about it. So in our video, they showed what 3 branches? Exactly, yes. So the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. So this video kind of sums it up nicely for you as our introduction. So we have 3 branches in our government. So our government is made up of 3 branches. And as they said in the video, no one branch is more important than the other. So they all have jobs that they have to complete, and they're all important to our government, and they're all needed and very, 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 very important. Each one of them has a different job, but each are valuable. So like they talked about the legislative branch in the video, they said it's made up of Congress, and those are the people who make the laws. And they also talked about in the video, the next branch would be the executive branch, the people who carry out the laws. And in that one, they showed the president. But as we do our reading, we're going to know that at different levels of the government, the head of the executive branch is going to be different depending on what level of government you're talking about, whether it's national, state, or local. But for our national government, the president would be ahead of the executive branch like they showed in the video. And then lastly, the judicial branch. So those are made up of our judiciary. So those are made up of our judges, and they are the people that interpret our laws. As we saw in the video, we saw all our judges in that little ring. So this video was a nice introduction of what 3 branches we're going to be looking at today, and kind of a little bit about what they do and how they all have to come together and make up our government. And they are all very important. Like the video said, I want to just repeat again that all of these branches are very important. Not one is more important than the other, and they're both vital to making our government and our countries and our states and our towns and our cities work and function. So now let's move on. So we are going to get more into the branches of government. We're going to learn more about it. So we're going to participate in a shared reading lesson. So we will boys and girls, I want you to remember that when we participate in a shared reading lesson, that I will be reading the text and you are going to be following along. So you need to be proactive listeners while I read the text. So you're going to follow along as I read. So I want you to take out your Illinois Adventure textbooks, and you're going to turn to page 176 so we can start reading. And as we're reading, we're going to read by chunks, boys and girls. And as we're reading, we're going to stop and we're going to talk about some of the academic language that we saw in that chunk. And we're going to talk about some questions and summarize up that chunk that we read. So as we write and talk about those academic language words and those definitions, I'd like you to have a piece of paper handy with you and a pencil, so that way you can write those down as well. So we make sure we have those definitions down and we understand what they mean as we read our text. So now I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see my my reading as well, but you should be following along in your own textbook. Okay, so government for Illinois. So the United States is made up of 50 states. Because they are in different places, they have different industries. They have different people with different ideas. Each state has different problems. Each state has its own state government. In the West, for example, Arizona and Utah make laws about how water can be used. Water is very important there because they are desert states. California's government inspects crops for insects that might have been brought in with loads of fruits or vegetables. Wisconsin makes laws about fishing in its many lakes and rivers and logging in its forests. Louisiana has laws about its docks where ships load and unload their cargoes. West Virginia makes laws about safety in its coal mines. Illinois makes laws about its farms. All states decide how fast drivers can go on highways. They all decide how they will run their schools. So, and then I'm going to read the little side note of your textbook under capital cities. So government representatives meet and make laws in the capital city. The capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. The capital of Illinois is Springfield. People who live in Illinois have to follow the rules of both the United States and the Illinois government. And you can read this, what do you think, on your own, but I'm going to continue on with the reading. So we're going to go to our state constitution. So Illinois has a constitution that tells how our state government works. Our first constitution was written in 1818 when Illinois became a state. As Illinois grew and changed, new constitutions were written. Over the years, there have been 4 different constitutions for our state government. The last one was written and voted on the people of Illinois in 1970. And this is a little picture at the bottom. So it says General Assembly Legislature. So we have the Senate and the House of Representatives. So Illinois has 59 senators. The House of Representatives, Illinois has 118 representatives. So now that we have read a little bit, we are going to talk about some of the academic language that we saw in our first text. So some of the words that may have been unfamiliar to you but are very important we need to define are words industry, government, and representatives. So in the passage, they talked about industries. So industries, the definition is a group of manufacturers or businesses that produce a specific good or service. So you might be familiar with the food industry. So those are manufacturers, people that are, or businesses that make food and sell food. There's also the toy industry that you're all probably very familiar with, the makeup industry, the clothing industry, the shoe industry. There's so many different types of industries, and it's really just businesses and manufacturers that make a specific good, whether it be toys, makeup, shoes, whatever it may be, to provide for people. So our next word is going to be government. So government, we're going to hear this word a lot. So it's important that we have a strong definition because we are talking about the government. So government is a group of people that have the power to rule in a territory they make laws for. The territory could be a country, it could be a state, it could be a city. So the government, again, is a group of people that have the power to rule in a territory they make laws for. And then our last academic language word for this section is going to be representatives. So representative is a person that represents and speaks for others. So a representative is a person that represents and speaks for others. So there are so many people in this country. There's so many people in the state and a lot of people in the city. And we cannot possibly all be able to get to voice our opinion and let it be heard by the president or by the government. So we vote in people that will represent us. So they will make decisions and put their votes in to represent what we would want. So now I'm going to ask you some comprehension questions about what we just read. So it's going to be just 3 short questions, and we're going to answer them together. And I'm going to have you guys volunteer if you know the answer. So number 1, who makes the laws in each individual state? Right, wonderful job. So each state has its own state government that makes the laws, right? So we have our national government that makes laws for our whole country, and then we have state government that makes laws for each individual states, right? Each individual state. Number 2, can states make their own laws? If so, give 2 examples of the kind of laws a state can make. Good job. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, nice job. So we kind of talked about it a little bit with that first one, but we need to give more examples and a little bit more detail. So yes, states can make their own laws that are specific to their own state, right? So for example, West Virginia, like you said, West Virginia makes laws about safety in coal mines, which is wonderful. And Wisconsin, as you said as well, makes laws about fishing and so each state makes its own laws depending on what they need in that state. And for Wisconsin, it's not going to be the same thing that Illinois needs, and it may not be the same thing as West Virginia needs. But they all get to make their own laws. They also get to make laws on schools and speed limits and highways and other things as well. So our third and final question, what is the purpose of the Illinois Constitution? So what is it? We've all heard of the Constitution. So what is the purpose of the Illinois Constitution? Because we've talked about a little bit about another kind of constitution, but what about our Illinois Constitution? What does the reading say? Yeah, good job. So the Constitution for Illinois tells how our state government works. So this is specifically for our state government, not for the United States as a whole, but for our state government because it's Illinois Constitution. So now just to summarize what we read in that chunk, so the United States government has laws that all people in America must follow, right? We all have laws in America that we all have to follow because we all live here. But states also have their own governments and they decide their own laws specific to their states to solve problems in their own states, to meet needs in their own states. So people that live in the United States have to follow the country's laws and the laws in which the state that they live in. All right. So that's where we would stop and we would go to the next chunk. But for time's sake, I'm going to jump down to the folio. But we would continue with the chunking. We would continue with the going over the academic language with the chunking and the summary. But again, just to save time, I'm going to continue down and just go to the folio part of the lesson. Okay. All right, boys and girls, so now that we have read our text and we've learned a lot about the branches of government and we've done shared reading, now we are going to do some writing about the branches of government. So I want you all to open up your folio and I want you to take a look at the first page. It's titled The Executive Branch. So everyone turn to the page that's titled Executive Branch. And we're going to be completing these worksheets and I'm going to model some for you. And then I'm going to give you time to finish them on your own. But first we're going to model the pages, some of the questions on the page. So let's look at that first question on that first page. So question number 1, what does the executive branch do? So, well, in order to find our answer, boys and girls, let's go back to our reading. So we read a lot of information, right? And we got a lot of new definitions. We wrote a lot of things down. There were a lot of important things. So, and I don't expect you to remember, boys and girls, by memory. You know, you just read it. It's new information. So you're not going to have it all just, oh, I know the answer. And that's okay. That's why we still have the text and we're going to reread it. And it's going to help us remember it. And it's going to help us find our answer. And the text is going to be just very useful during our folio. So we're going to use that text. Do not be afraid to use your text because that's what we want to do. We want to go back and we want to reread the text. So we're going to go to the page where the book talks about the executive branch, because that's the question that we're answering. It's about what the executive branch does. So we're going to go to page 178. That's where our executive branch section is on. And in order to find our answer, we're going to silently reread the passage. I'm going to give you a few moments to silently reread the passage. And as you're reading, you are looking for the answer to the question, what does the executive branch do? Once you find it, circle it, highlight it, post-it note it, whatever you'd like to do to know that you have found your answer. So that way we can transfer it onto our folio. So go ahead and take a few seconds to do that. Okay, boys and girls, now that we've had time to reread the passage, you should have continued reading and you should have found that the executive branch, what does the executive branch do? Does anyone have an answer for me? Yep, so if you kept on reading, you find that the executive branch carries out the laws. So we reread the passage, and in the passage, it tells us the executive branch carries out the laws, which is going to be our answer for the fill in the blank there. So now let's go to our second question. So who is the head of the executive branch? Well, if I want to find this answer, I'm going to continue to reread. So I'm going to go back up to that section. I'm going to go back to 178, and I'm going to reread and look for my answer. And so who is the head of the executive branch? So we're going to go back up and look for the answer. I'm going to give you a few moments to do that. All right, so if you continued reading and we silently reread, you can see that the governor is the head of the executive branch. So the governor is the head of the executive branch. All right, now that I modeled that question for you, we're going to go on to the next page titled the legislative branch, and I will also model the first two questions for you. So question 1, the legislative branch. On the legislative branch, question 1 is the legislative branch blank. So we have to fill in the blank for this question again, like we did previously. So let's use our reading to help answer our question. So we need to go back up to the page where they talk about the legislative branch, and we're going to silently reread and look for our answer to fill in the legislative branch blank. So go ahead. All right, boys and girls, if you reread in the passage, you should have found that the legislative branch makes the law. So that is our answer. So our answer should be the legislative branch and then fill in makes the laws. Now let's go on to question number 2, which says the General Assembly is made up of blank and the blank. So this is another fill in the blank question, and it has 2 spaces, so that tells us that we will have 2 parts to our answer. So now let's go back to our reading again, and let's continue reading and see if we can find our answer. All right, boys and girls, so if you kept rereading, you should found that on the last sentence in the paragraph about the legislative branch, it says the General Assembly is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. All right, finally, boys and girls, let's turn to the final page of our folio titled Judicial Branch. So let's do the first 2 questions together. So question 1, the blank make up the judicial branch of Illinois state government. For this question, again, let's revisit the text. Let's use our text. Let's reread it. So the judicial branch section is on page 178. So I want you to go back and reread and look to find out the blank make up the judicial branch. All right, boys and girls, if you reread, you should have found that in the very first sentence, there is the answer. So the answer was listed in that first sentence. So the courts make up the judicial branch. So the courts. So question number 2, the judicial branch interprets blank. So let's go back to our text again, reread, and continue on. So if you continued on and you silently reread the text, you would find that in the second sentence is where you can find your answer. So the judicial branch interprets the laws. So that would be our answer for our second question. So you see, boys and girls, it's all about rereading the text. Use your text. So all our information about the branches of government and all of the things that we learned about are in the text. It's in the folio, and they're going to ask us about it, and we can go and search and reread and find our answers for our folio. So I'm going to give you some time to finish up your folio, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit more. All right, boys and girls, now that everyone is pretty much done with their folio, let's turn it in at the front, and let's grab a performance task sheet of our academic language. So it's just a crossword puzzle, and you're just going to read the definition and decide what word is being defined and write it in the correct boxes. So it's going to be just the words that we talked about today from our textbook, all the ones that we picked out from our chunks and defined and that you should have been writing down during class. So I'm going to give you some time to do that as well. All righty. All right, boys and girls, so now we are coming to an end of our lesson. So as you finish your performance task sheet, make sure you're turning it in. But I just want to talk about, what we did today and some of the things we learned. So boys and girls, today we learned a lot about the branches of government. We watched a really interesting video. We all participated in a shared reading activity. And we learned a lot of new words. So some of our new words, I'm going to list them off and redefine them for you and just go over them again. So industries is a group of manufacturers or businesses that produce a specific good or service. Government, a group of people that have the power to rule in a territory they make the laws for. The territory could be a country, state, or city. Representatives, a person that represents and speaks for others. Majority vote, more than half of the votes cast. General Assembly, a legislative assembly like the U.S. state legislature, Senate, and the House. Veto is the power of a president, governor, or a mayor to stop a bill from becoming a law. Elect, to select by vote for an office or position. Interpret, to provide the meaning of something. Jury, a group of citizens chosen to listen and decide based on the facts of a case in court. Population, the whole number of people living in an area. National, referring to the entire country. Local government, smallest form of the three types of government, and it is in charge of the smaller areas that make up a state, like towns and cities. So, boys and girls, we learned a lot of academic language today, and we read a lot about our branches of government. So we read about how the different levels of government, so whether it's national, state, or local, are broken up in the same way. They're broken up in legislative, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And at each level, these branches were created so that not one person or one group of people have too much power. So that's why we have it in place. And they each have their own specific role that are very, very important. And they all have their own jobs and duties to carry out that are very important. And no branch is more important than another. They're all of equal importance. So we learned that the legislative branch makes the laws. They vote and decide what bills turn into laws. The executive branch carries out those laws, and for the different levels of the government, there are different positions that are in charge of the executive branch. So in the video, we showed that nationally, for as a country, the president is in charge of the executive branch. For our state, it would be the governor, and for like our local governments, it would be, so like our cities and our towns, it would be the mayor. We also talked about, like I said, the legislative, we talked about the executive, and we also talked about the judicial. So, and it's made up of the courts that are elected, that have elected judges that are in charge, and they interpret the laws. So in court, they determine if a person is guilty of a crime based on the law, so if they had broken them or not. So all three of these branches are very important. Not one is more important than the other, and they all have their own duties and jobs that they have to follow and do, and they're all very important. So we learned a lot about the branches of government and how we see them nationally, state, and in our local governments. And we did a great job completing our folio, boys and girls, and I really appreciate all the participation. So thank you so much, boys and girls. As you finish, remember, please turn in your performance task sheets in the front. And once you are finished with that, you can read silently at your desk until everyone else is finished and we wrap up, and so we can move on to our next lesson today. But thank you so much, boys and girls, for your participation in our branches of government lesson today.